Today we're going to do a saltwater fly that originated on the East Coast, the Northeast Coast, striper fishing. It's called a Gurgler. It was originated by an angler named Jack Gartside. And this is a fantastic pattern in all different sizes. It is a great topwater pattern, mainly because it creates a big disturbance. It's sparse and easy to cast. It's also very cheap to make. A lot of guys will use this for pike, for bass. A friend of mine was in Mongolia last year, and in big sizes, this fly is the #1 taimen fly, or at least it was last year with him. So we'll start with the Gurgler. Any size, color of prey species you may want to tie can be imitated. Today we're going to do one that's kind of silver and gray, pearl and gray, to imitate a small bait fish. I'm doing this one on a 1/0 standard saltwater hook. And we're going to go on, and the first thing we're going to do with this fly is we're going to tie in our tail. I'm going to start my thread roughly at the point of that hook, and we're going to put our tail together. I'm going to do a two-tone tail with white and gray. Both of these are fishhair or ice hair material. And we're going to start off with our white. The key to this, you want this to be sparse. You want to add the illusion of life. This is a bait fish kind of in the surface film that is wounded, trying to escape. You also don't want to overdo this tail. The heavier you make it, the more water it's going to retain, even though both of these artificial materials don't retain much water at all, but it'll just be tougher to cast over time. So I'm going, and I've cut a small kind of, I don't know, 1/16 or an 1/18 of an inch clump. Want to make sure that the middle of it has a little bit longer than the edges. You don't want it to just be a sharp scissor cut. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my tail roughly 1.5 hook shanks in length. And I'm just going to take 2 or 3 solid wraps over that material to lock it in place. Now you notice I'm not tying a ton of wraps to make sure it's there. 2 or 3 is all you need. We're going to be tying down the rest of this body as we build the fly, and you don't want to create a big thread base at the base of this fly. It just wouldn't look good, having a big bump kind of on the tail. Now I'm going to add some of this gray ice fur, and again, I'm just going to make sure that it's not just a clean. I'm just going to make sure this tail has some taper to it. Making sure it's sparse. Nice taper. And then I'm going to tie that in so the tips of the gray material match the tips of the pearl. I'm going to give it a couple hard wraps. Make sure everything's good with the tail. And then I'm going to come on up and I'm going to trim the butts of this material almost up to the eye, but you'll notice I'm going to definitely give myself plenty of room to make a nice head. We're going to be folding a foam back over this, so you want to make sure you got plenty of room at the eye and you're not crowding it. And then in the interest of keeping a nice even body, I like to go in a few loose wraps on the first pass to lock everything down. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be tying plenty of material over this, but this will make sure it's a nice clean taper throughout your fly. Wind that back to where we've finished our tail. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut and tie in the foam strip that will serve as the back of this fly. You can see this is a thin foam. There's a couple different kinds of foam out there. You want to make sure this is more of the open cell as opposed to the closed cell variety. It'll just tie down much better. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the back of this fly. And the first thing I'm going to do when we're completed, you're going to want it to be a good distance so it will gurgle and pop on either side of that fly. So I'm going to take a quick estimate and I'm just going to cut the strip first. And I'm not going to worry about a taper to this. We'll taper it second, but you want to make sure you got your strip of foam. Double check it again. Yep, that'll be a nice popping face on the eye of that. So you want basically at least the hook eye diameter on either side. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to taper this. This is going to come over the top. We're going to fold it over the top. and you're going to want to have enough left for a lip. So the lip will be sticking up roughly like that. So this will roughly be my tie-in point. So I'm going to have about 2 times that length. Trim off the excess. And then I don't want a ton of bulk on the body of this fly. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a nice thin strip to tie in with. Basically cut away the sides of this foam strip. This will give me a nice taper in the back and will also prevent bulk. You'll notice I'll be able to basically tie in with that skinny strip, and then we'll be able to fold over and still have enough for a lip. Go ahead and tie this in now. And you want to make sure you want it tight, but you don't really want to just kind of crank down on this foam. You don't want to cut the foam as you're tying it. And I'm going to add just a small bead of Zap-A-Gap underneath this. This will really make sure everything kind of locks in on the fly. These flies can and hopefully will take some abuse as you fish them from fast, mean saltwater critters. I'm going to make sure that my tag is not going to cramp into that area that I want to leave open. And then I like to do just some real kind of loose wraps on the way up, making sure that everything is square and seated on top of that. And then on the way back, I'm going to do my nice clean wraps, locking that foam in place. It doesn't have to be perfectly concentric wraps next to each other, but when you get a bubble in the foam like that, I like to go back and just make sure it's tight with the rest of the body. That'll give you a sharp looking fly when you're done with it. From here on out, we're basically tying a woolly bugger. I'm going to select a hackle, which I'll tie in first. I'm just going to select kind of a big Webby hackle. This fly is kind of all about motion and attraction. And then I like to strip one side. I found that it just gives you a much cleaner fly if you only try to use the hackles off one side. You might need a little bit longer hackle to do this, but I think you'll be pleased with the results in the end. So I'm going to strip off the portion of the fly that I don't want on what is going to be the woolly bugger body of this gurgler. I'm going to go back now, and this will be my tie-in point. Don't feel like you have to use the tip. You want this to be buggy and long. So I'm just going to select a nice kind of length to my hackle. I'm going to take a couple wraps, tie that in, trim the butt. Now I'm going to use I believe this is medium, kind of Cactus chenille. It's Estaz is another product. You just want to use a good kind of flashy. Crystal chenille would work fine. Flashy large chenille. Pull a little from the butt so it's nice and clean as you tie it in. Lock all that down. Carry your thread on up. Now we're just going to palmer this crystal chenille over the hook. I like to kind of wrap it back as I tie it in. Pull some of these fibers, like these fibers right here. If I were to take a wrap right now, I'd be tying them down. I like to kind of push those back. We're using this for its flash and its movement. So if you go ahead and smooth those fibers back with every wrap, you'll get a nice full bushy body. And again, feel free to play with the colors of this fly. Look at the bait fish in your area. Look at, I don't know, the mice or the lemmings in your area and match the hatch. You're just looking for kind of the right size, shape, and color. This popping lip adds a lot of kind of fish attention getting noise out there in the salt for you as well. So I'm going to palmer this crystal chenille up to the eye. I'm going to tie it off. I'm just going to give it 2-3 wraps. Trim off my excess. At this point, I like to just kind of pull those extra fibers back. Make for a little bit cleaner eye of the fly. Get a nice head. Now we're ready to bring forward and palmer up our grizzly hackle. Again, nice, big, bushy, Webby grizzly. And you've noticed that with only having hackles on one side, I'm not getting a lot of overwrap. I like having some marabou on here as well. It adds a lot of outstanding motion. Something that Jack Gartside was a huge fan was these phyllo plumes at the base of this hackle. So I'm going to have a little bit of marabou up towards the top. I'm going to bring that hackle up to where we've started that thread head. I'm going to go ahead and tie that off. And then again, just like I did with that crystal chenille, almost like tying in a collar, I like to cover up that hackle stem, get all those smooth and nice and flowing back over the bend of the hook. And then very quickly, to finish it off, I'm going to bring my foam back over the top. This is also a deadly fly tied in hot pink with a shorter tail for silver salmon. Tie that down with a few firm but not too tight wraps. It would really be a bummer to cut your foam at this point. And then I'm going to come in front of this lip and really build a nice head. I'm pulling back on the lip of this fly so I get that foam piece sticking straight up. That's what's going to be our popping lip, if you will, on this fly. Build a thread head. A few extra little crystal chenille fibers I'm just going to clean up. If I wasn't being filmed, I probably wouldn't do that. I'm going to whip finish the head of this fly. Done with the thread. Now we're just going to trim this top of this gurgler. You don't want too much, about at least half the shank of the hook. But that nice foam lip as you fish this fly, it's going to create a disturbance on the top of that water. Pop it for you. There's your gurgler.